And thank you very much, Auntie Deb, for the welcome to country. And thank you for Cole from speaking on behalf of retired coal miners. And thank you very much for Lindsay for talking about from the tourism industry. We've got people from all over the state, from diverse industries, and we've got all of the people in the crowd here who are all from diverse backgrounds and diverse interests. There's farmers in this audience. They've made themselves clear, and I'm really glad that they've travelled quite a way to be here. I got here at midnight last night, and I came down from Yeppoon, and it was a bit of a night run because I've been campaigning up in central Queensland with the farmers. So I was in the Q&A audience in Mackay on Monday night. Did everybody catch that bonanza of entertainment? Well, that was really interesting. It was really very entertaining, but unfortunately, I think if you watched Q&A on Monday night, you might think that Central Queensland actually want mines like Adani to go ahead in the Galilee Basin. Well, my experience is that's not true. The only people that I meet in Central Queensland who want the mine to go ahead are the politicians that were on that panel. Now, the problem is that I have, in my role as Queensland Coordinator for Farmers for Climate Action, I've talked to over 20 MPs this year alone, and many of them have been ALP, and many of them have been senior ministers and senior people in the organisation. And what I'm finding is that the majority of ALP people don't want the actual Adani to go ahead. I've found that in my conversations. But what they're saying is that they don't think it's going to go ahead because it won't get up. And so they're kind of walking into blindfolded and with their hands tied and the ears covered and just hoping that the mine will just go away. And in fact, I think a lot of the people in the community are thinking that as well, is that they think that the mine's not going to go ahead. Well, let me tell you that if we don't stand up to this mine, it is going to go ahead. And we need to keep on building on the Stop Adani movement. So we did peak during the state election, and we had this marvellous result of the Premier coming out and saying no to giving $1 billion of taxpayers' money to build the rail line, and that was because of you. That was because of the pressure that people here in South Brisbane put on the campaign. So congratulations. I think my PA is running out. I'm not sure. I feel like I'm getting softer and softer. I won't go on for too much longer.
We can hear you.
Listen. The issue up there in central Queensland, and as opposed to some of the perceptions, is that the farmers up there don't want it either, because the farmers up there are often in their last little bit of water. They're operating on one bore on the property, and those bore levels are dropping because of the drought, and probably because it's been overuse over many decades. That they're working on that. They're working on the environmental issues, but they can't work without water. And if those mines go ahead, and I'm talking about the Galilee Basin, the climate bomb in the Galilee, because if that goes off, that's it. We will not make the target Paris emissions if we burn all of the coal in the Galilee. This is where we have to draw the line in the sand. This is where we say no. We've had enough. So 260 billion litres of water for the Adani mine alone for the lifetime of their mine. This is compared to a farmer who has to pay up to $1 million to sink a bore on his property to get to the Great Artesian Basin, and they get it for free. And if you listen to Q&A, you hear those politicians, they're saying misleading things like Adani's only going to use about as much water as a cane farm, as a small, medium cane farm. What they're talking about is the drinking water that they want to take from the Sator River, which can't spare it either, by the way. So what's happening is that mine, that when I talk about 260 billion litres of water that the mine's going to take, I'm talking about the aquifers bleeding into the pits, into the big, huge coal pits that they will leave. So the aquifers get broken and bleed into the pits, and then it has to be pumped out as polluted water into the Carmichael River, which is also affecting that water source as well. So they don't include that either. So the impact is enormous, and if they build the other 8 coal mines along the Galilee Basin, this is a 300-kilometre long coal mine. This is an Armageddon situation, basically. Then there's no way that we can find out what's going to happen to the Great Artesian Basin for that. And the Great Artesian Basin employs tens of thousands of people in Australia. The Great Barrier Reef employs tens of thousands of people. And Adani are telling us that we need to jeopardise all that for a handful of jobs in an automated mine from pit to port. Now the The message that I bring you is from the farmers that I work with, people like Will and John Graham, who have a massive grazing property west of Emerald, and they actually have enormously beautiful land. They've kept their trees, they've kept their biodiversity. They feel like they're custodians. They're the best people you'd want to ever meet, and they're worried that in 10 years' time they won't have a water source. From people like Bruce and Annette Curry, who I met Annette at the Beyond Coal and Gas. Annette burst into tears when I was talking to her because she couldn't believe that all of these people down here in South Queensland actually cared about what happened to them. And we do care, because they're up there alone, and this is why, and today we're showing support for them. So Bruce and Annette Curry, they've got mines just absolutely bordering their property, and if they lose their groundwater, that's it. There'll be no more production on their farm, and there'll be no more native wildlife on their farm, because the only water there is supplied by the groundwater. So it'll be a disaster for the graziers, for the environment, and for the communities that depend on the groundwater. My message to you from them is one of solidarity. They stand with you today. They can't be here. They've got to deal with a record historic drought, and I haven't even begun on that, but I won't. But I think you can get the implications of dealing with an historic drought when you think you've got a bunch of mines coming in to take all your water. You can imagine the stress of living with that sort of situation. So my message is, please support the farmers, and please support Farmers for Climate Action, and everybody, and all of the people here in South Brisbane that are fighting this mine. Thank you very much.